This is slide 4, more New Deal. We started talking about on the last slide Roosevelt's domestic program, his plan to fix the Great Depression. So let's continue our discussions of the New Deal. First of all, a term you need to be familiar with, the alphabet soup government. Roosevelt's government gets the nickname the alphabet soup government because he created so many of these new programs that they simply came to be known by their initials. So if you looked at a bowl of alphabet soup with all the letters floating around, you could pick out several of them and probably have one of Roosevelt's programs. The CCC, the WPA, the PWA, the AAA, the CWA, you name it. Lots of different programs known by their initials. By the time we get to 1933, 25% of the American workers were unemployed. 1 out of every 4 workers could not find a job. So Roosevelt's most important job here was to create jobs, to put people back to work. He says that private businesses had their chance, and they failed. And when business failed, it's time for the government to step in and take over. Now, there is one huge downside to all this. It is going to be incredibly expensive. The government's going to have to put these people to work and pay these people, and that's going to cost a lot of money. But that's a long-term problem. Right now, Roosevelt is worried about fixing the problem. And if it means that the government's going to have to go into debt paying people, then so be it. So let's talk about 5 of the agencies here that Roosevelt creates. The first one, the CCC, this is the most popular of all of the New Deal agencies. And this was the outdoor program, the environment group here. This put young men to work in outdoor situations, in national parks, clearing land, clearing trails, building cabins, building lodges, building parks, cleaning out rivers, dredging out rivers, you name it. This is the outdoor group, the environmental group. So it took young men and put them to work doing outdoor environmental type of jobs. Now, about 3 million men got work doing this. Now, the catch was that if you got hired as a CCC worker, you had to send the bulk of your paycheck back home to your families. So you couldn't work for them, make a lot of money, go get drunk every night, and spend all your money. You had to send your paycheck back home to your families so that they could pay their mortgage, pay the bills, buy food, provide for children, and so forth. But men were happy to do that. They were just happy to have a job. Okay? If any of you are familiar with Otter Creek State Park down near Brandenburg in Meade County here in Kentucky, Otter Creek was a CCC project. It was built in the 1930s by CCC workers. So we do have a somewhat local connection here. Okay? The second one was the FERA. Oh, sorry, forgot to tell you, CCC, as you see in the picture right here, stood for Civilian Conservation Corps. That's CORPS. It's not corpse, okay, it's Corps, like the Marine Corps. But civilian, meaning non-military, conservation, meaning environment, and the Corps, a group of workers. Okay? So you got the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC. Okay, let's move on to the FERA. Stands for Federal Emergency Relief Administration. Federal Emergency Relief Administration. And as we said earlier, relief programs were immediate fixes. This one sent money directly to the states. So the federal government would send money to the states and allow the states to use that money as best as they saw fit, with the thought that maybe the government of Oklahoma knew better what the people of Oklahoma needed than people in Washington, D.C. did. So let's give the money directly to the states, and then the states can use the money to help their people. by creating jobs. So Federal Emergency Relief Administration sent money directly to the states. Next, we have the AAA. That's not the American Automobile Association. No. That stands for the Agricultural Adjustment Act. Agricultural Adjustment Act. And this program makes money available to help farmers pay their mortgages. Farmers have been struggling for a long time, go back to the 20s, and they're losing their farms because they can't pay their mortgage on their house and on their land. So the Agricultural Adjustment Act will give money to farmers to help them pay their mortgages so they don't lose their homes, they don't lose their land, they can keep doing what it is they do, which is farm. Next, very, very, very similar, is the HOLC, Homeowners Loan Corporation. Homeowners Loan Corporation. This does the same thing the AAA does, but for non-farm families. So it gives money to families, non-farm families, so urban people. It gives money to urban families to pay their mortgages so they don't lose their homes. We got to stop people being homeless. So this helps them pay their mortgage to keep their home so they're not living on the streets or in Hooverville somewhere. Last program we're going to talk about here at this time is called the CWA. And this was a recovery program, a temporary program, stands for Civil Works Administration. Civil Works Administration. It gives temporary jobs to people to get money into their hands. So we said earlier, like your job may be raking leaves down at the park, or washing windows at the City Hall building, or shoveling snow from in front of the courthouse or something. These are day jobs or maybe a week-long job that you have just to get some money into people's hands so they can pay their bills and buy things and get the economy going again. Now, not everybody was a fan of Roosevelt's. So we need to talk about a couple of them in particular, and they are known as demagogues. Okay? Demagogues. This is a person who appeals to people's desires and emotions and their prejudices rather than using rational arguments or logic. They appeal to people's fears and their emotions. Right? And two of them in particular we need to mention. The first one is Father Charles Coughlin, who you see in the picture right here. Father Charles Coughlin was a Catholic priest who had a radio show. Initially on, he's a supporter of Roosevelt, but eventually he turns against Roosevelt. His sermons online become very anti-Semitic, meaning anti-Jewish. Most of the banks in the country were owned by Jews. And Father Coughlin sees the banks as the biggest problem. So he wants Roosevelt to take over all the banks, to nationalize the banks, to have the government run the banks, and kick the Jewish bank owners out. He blames the Jews for much of the problems of the Great Depression. And when Roosevelt refuses to do this, Father Charles Coughlin uses his microphone. He's known as the microphone messiah for his radio show. Coughlin will use his microphone to start bad-mouthing Roosevelt, encouraging people to rebel against Roosevelt and against the government. Now, the bigger threat is a man named Huey Long. Huey Long, and this is Long right up here in the top right of the slide. Long started out as governor of Louisiana, and then he becomes a senator from Louisiana. And Long wants to basically kick out capitalism and put in socialism. He wants the government to run everything and take care of the people. He wants to start a program called Share Our Wealth. Okay? And the slogan of the Share Our Wealth program was, "Every man a king." Okay? Every man a king. What Huey Long wanted to do was to tax the rich. Anybody who had an income of over $1 million, he wanted to tax them at a 100% rate. Take that money and give it to the poor. He's sort of like a modern day Robin Hood. He promised, if he were put in charge, every family would be given a one-time payment of $5,000 with a guaranteed yearly minimum income of $2,500. So $5,000 up front and $2,500 on top of that every year. So he was going to take the money from the rich and give it to the poor. Okay? Long is very popular. He's got a lot of people behind his program, a lot of support. Franklin Roosevelt called Huey Long the most dangerous man in America because of his desires to overthrow capitalism, put in a socialist government. Long was shot and killed by an assassin in 1935. A lot of people suspect maybe Roosevelt and the government was behind the assassination. It's never been proven, but a lot of people might question that. So anyway, so much for our more New Deal.